The parking lot is drowning in rain. Summer thunder cracks across the Nevada sky like a whip snapping through bone, and the asphalt shimmers black and endless under the flickering light of a single lamp pole that's been broken for 3 weeks. Nobody fixes things that don't matter. The mountain lodge rises behind the parking lot, all glass and stone and the kind of silence that only money can buy, and Nicholas Caruso steps out of a black SUV into the downpour without hesitation, his cashmere coat, worth more than a year of most people's rent, already soaked through at the shoulders. He freezes mid-step. 15 feet away, under that dying light, a man with bleached knuckles has a woman pinned against the brick wall. Her Maid uniform clings to her frame like a second skin, dark and drenched, and her throat is wrapped in the grip of a hand that knows exactly how much pressure breaks things. She is not screaming. This is what breaks something in Caruso's chest. Not the fear. Not the violence. The silence. Her eyes are squeezed shut so tight her entire face has crumpled inward, and her free hand dangles at her side like it has already surrendered. She's waiting for the blow. Douglas Hale's arm is cocked back, his fist a stone ready to fall, and he doesn't see Caruso until a hand, steady, controlled, almost gentle, wraps around his wrist mid-swing. The pressure is not violent. It is inevitable. You have 3 seconds to remove yourself from my property. Caruso's voice is deep and solid like an oath, and every word carries the weight of 15 years of men learning what happens when they don't listen. His 2 lieutenants, Carlo and Theo, materialize from the SUV like shadows pulling themselves from water. They move without sound. They move without hurry. Douglas stumbles backward, his hand dropping from the woman's throat, his face going pale as the reality of the situation rewrites itself across his features. The man he's just put his hands on is not security. Security does not wear suits that cost $3,000. Security does not move with that kind of certainty. I didn't know, man, I didn't. 2 seconds. Douglas retreats into the rain, his words dissolving into the storm, and within moments he has vanished into the darkness beyond the parking lot lamp. The woman slides down the brick wall slowly, her legs giving out beneath her in increments, as if her body is only now learning that she is permitted to stop bracing for impact. Her hands are shaking. The mascara that she applied this morning with the precision of someone who understands that looking put together is a survival skill has begun running in dark rivers down her cheeks. She does not look up at Caruso. Not at first. When she does, her eyes are the color of winter water, pale gray-blue, wide, searching for some explanation of why a stranger in an impossibly expensive coat has just stepped between her and the man who has been stalking her across 3 states. Her name is Nora Reynolds. She is 28 years old, though exhaustion has stolen years from her face, carving shadows under her eyes that belong to someone much older. She has worked double shifts at this lodge for 18 months. She has eaten the leftovers from room 312's room service 3 nights a week. She has $5 in the pocket of her work pants. $5. That is what stands between her and homelessness when the rent comes due in 8 days. And she has absolutely no idea that this man, bleeding from a knife wound sustained less than an hour earlier during a meeting with rival gang members in a back room of a downtown casino, will become the only reason she and her 2 children survive the next 14 days. But what she can see right now is his hand. It is trembling slightly as he reaches down to offer it to her, and the trembling is the most human thing he has shown anyone in longer than he can remember. His name is Nicholas Caruso. He is 42 years old, 6 feet 2 inches tall, with dark hair that has begun graying at the temples and a scar running from the outer corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a violence he survived at age 19, the night his father died in a warehouse fire that was not an accident. She takes his hand. His grip is firm but careful, as if he understands that she has been handled roughly and needs to know that this grip will not become another trap. She rises unsteadily, her legs still learning to support her weight. Rain falls between them, and the thunder rolls again, closer now, so close that the sound vibrates through the parking lot and into the soles of their shoes. "Are you hurt?" His voice has shifted. The threat is gone. What remains is something she cannot name. She shakes her head. A lie? Her cheekbone throbs where Douglas's fist connected 3 minutes ago. Her throat burns where his fingers left marks that will bloom purple by morning. But she is not hurt in the way he means. "What is your name?" "Nora." Her voice trembles like a candle in the wind. "Nora Reynolds." "Does he live nearby, Nora Reynolds?" "He's supposed to have a restraining order." She laughs, but there is no humor in it. The sound is shattered glass. He has a restraining order. He just doesn't think it applies to him. Caruso's jaw tightens. His men have withdrawn to the SUV, but they are watching through the windows, and in 15 years of working for him, neither Carlo nor Theo has ever seen him stand this close to anyone without a barrier between them. Neither has ever seen him lower his hand in any gesture that might be construed as vulnerability. "Is he a danger to you?" "Always," Nora says, and the word comes out like a confession. Carlo and Theo exchange a look across the distance of the parking lot. Something has shifted. Something has changed in the way their boss is standing. In the way he is looking at this woman who is nobody, just a maid in a drenched uniform with bruises blooming on her neck. "You will not be alone tonight," Caruso says, and the statement carries the weight of a vow. "You will work your shift. Then you will come to my office. We will discuss what happens next." Nora does not understand that he is already making a choice, right now, in this rain-soaked parking lot under a light that has been broken for 3 weeks. He is choosing to see her. He is choosing to make her his responsibility. And for a man like Nicholas Caruso, responsibility has always meant that your enemies become his enemies, and your survival becomes non-negotiable. "Why would you help me?" she whispers. "I'm just someone who cleans your rooms." "Because the people who did this to you," Caruso says, and his gaze slides toward the darkness where Douglas vanished, "believed you were nobody. And that belief needs to be corrected." The rain hammers harder. The thunder rolls again. And in the distance, barely audible beneath the storm, the sound of an engine turning over, Douglas Hale driving away into the night, entirely unaware that the man whose property he has just violated for the last time controls more of Las Vegas than most people understand is possible. Nora stands in the rain, her uniform clinging to her, her body still trembling from the impact of being held against a wall and the even stranger impact of being held by a stranger's hand and told that she will not be alone. She has no idea what comes next. Before we continue, drop a like if this story is hitting you. Share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next, because what's coming will shock you. And if you're still watching, you're amazing. Now let us go back to the very beginning, to understand how a single mother with nothing and a man with everything found each other on the same summer night, and how 14 days changed both of their fates forever. 3 days earlier, the rent notice arrived. Nora was sitting in her apartment, a studio that cost $850 a month and contained only the essentials, accounting the bills in her checking account for the 4th time that day, hoping that perhaps her math had been wrong and that somehow there was more money than the $312 showing on her phone screen. There was not. The notice came from the foreclosure company, printed on official letterhead, stating with bureaucratic certainty that she owed $22,000 in back rent and property damage from the incident. The incident. That is what they call it in the reports. That is what the police called it when Douglas put his fist through the kitchen wall and then through her car window. That is what her landlord called it when he informed her that she was responsible for all of it, down to the last screw. $22,000. She had $5 in her pocket. The kitchen table was covered in bills. Not the important kind in envelopes with official letterhead, but the crumpled kind pulled from pockets and jars, smoothed out and sorted by denomination under a single lamp at 11 o'clock at night. Nora Reynolds counted them again. 5 ones. 3 quarters. 8 dimes. 2 pennies she almost left behind because the effort of bending down felt too heavy. $5.63. That was everything. That was the amount standing between her family and the street. She was 28 years old but looked 35. Dark hair pulled back so tightly it stretched the skin at her temples. Eyes that had forgotten what rest felt like. Calloused hands from 6 years of scrubbing other people's homes, other people's mistakes, other people's lives clean. The apartment around her was silent except for the tick of the electric clock on the wall, the kind that used no batteries because she could not afford to replace them. Somewhere in the darkness behind the bedroom door, her daughter Emma was sleeping. 6 years old. First grade. Still believed her mother was the strongest person alive. The foreclosure notice lay on the table next to the bills. It had arrived that morning, printed on official letterhead with margins that looked expensive, signed by someone who had never seen her face or heard her voice. The letter said she owed $22,000. It said this amount was due in 14 days. It said the property would be seized. It used the word immediately 3 times. $22,000. She picked up the calculator. The same calculator she used to budget groceries, to divide rent into equal portions of impossibility. She entered the number. Then she entered her hourly wage. $12 an hour. She worked 6 days a week. Sometimes 7. The calculator showed her that it would take 1,833 hours of work to earn that amount. That was for months of non-stop labor without sleeping, without eating, without the luxury of being sick. The calculator did not know that she only got 4 hours of sleep a night anyway. It did not account for that. There was a sound from the bedroom. Emma stirring. Nora looked up from the numbers, waiting, holding her breath the way mothers do when their children are on the edge of waking. If Emma woke, she would come out here and ask for water or ask why Mama was still awake, and Nora would have to smile and pretend that $5.63 was not a catastrophe. The stirring stopped. Emma slipped back into sleep. Nora's eyes landed on the drawer beneath the table. Inside, beneath old bills and expired identification cards, were Emma's first shoes. Size 4. White leather with pink laces. She kept them there like a prayer, like evidence, like a memory of the only thing worse than where she was now. 3 years ago, she and Emma had spent for months in the Riverside Women's Shelter. Nora was escaping Douglas then, escaping him for the first time, though she did not know it would not be the last time. She had nothing. She and Emma owned 2 pairs of clothes each. Emma's feet were bare because shoes cost money and food cost money and you could only choose one. She chose food. A social worker named Margaret had pulled Nora aside on a Tuesday afternoon. She handed her a box. Inside were 6 pairs of shoes, new, with tags still attached. These were donated, Margaret said. Emma can pick whichever pair she wants. Nora had cried so hard she could not see which ones Emma chose. But Emma had come back holding the white ones with the pink laces, and she had hugged them to her chest like they were made of gold. That night, Nora had dried her tears and promised her daughter that they would never go back to the shelter. They would never be nobody again. They would build something. A life. A home. A future. Nora kept those shoes as proof that promises could be kept. That things could get better. Now, sitting in the darkness with $5.63 in front of her and a letter demanding $22,000, she understood that promises were fragile things. That better was a direction you could walk toward and never actually reach. The shoe sat in her drawer like a broken covenant. She needed to sleep, but sleep would not come. Instead, she showered in water that was barely warm, the heating bill was too high, and pulled on her work uniform. Grey dress with white trim and a name tag that said simply, Nora. No last name. Just Nora. Interchangeable. Unremarkable. The kind of woman people looked through instead of at. She liked it that way. It was safer to be invisible. The bus ride to the lodge took 40 minutes. She usually walked the final 2 miles to save the $3.50 bus fare, but tonight the heat was oppressive. Humidity wrapped around the city like something alive. The sky pressed down in shades of grey-green that made your lungs feel too tight. A storm was coming. You could taste it in the air, electric and sharp like copper on your tongue. She paid for the bus. $1 more gone from the world. The lodge sat 40 minutes north of Las Vegas, nestled into pine forest so dense the trees seemed to be holding their breath. It was the kind of property that existed in the margins between worlds, visible on satellite images but not in any guidebook, accessible by a private road marked only by a number on a metal sign, guarded by a gate that did not look like a gate until you tried to drive through it. The lodge itself was all glass and stone, 3 stories of windows that overlooked nothing but trees. 12 bedrooms. 15 bathrooms. A kitchen larger than the entire apartment where Nora and Emma lived. Nicholas Caruso owned it, though he rarely came here. Nora knew his name because his accounts manager, a woman named Victoria, arrived monthly to inspect the property and find reasons to deduct from Nora's paycheck. Victoria looked at Nora the way you might look at a smudge on a window, with annoyance and the vague suspicion that you would eventually have to deal with it. Tuesday was Nora's evening shift. The lodge was always empty on Tuesdays. That was the routine. Come in at 5, clean the common areas, change the linens, stock the kitchen, leave at 9. It was the quietest shift. Sometimes Nora sat in a library and read books she was not supposed to touch, careful to leave no trace. There was a copy of Wuthering Heights with an inscription on the first page, "To Nicholas, on your 18th birthday. May you find what you're looking for. Love, Mama." The inscription was dated 25 years ago. The mama was in handwriting that was shaking, uncertain. Nora wondered if Caruso's mother was still alive. She wondered if she was the type to worry about her son, or if she understood what he was. But tonight, as Nora entered through the service door, she heard voices. Male. Low. Tense in a way that made the air feel thin. She stopped moving. Her body understood danger even before her mind did. The ability to detect threat in a room was something she had learned from Douglas, acquired the way organisms acquire adaptive traits, through survival, through repetition, through the terrible knowledge that sometimes a man's voice could change quality half a second before his hand became a fist. The voices were coming from the dining room. She could see light beneath the heavy oak door. She should have left. Should have turned around and walked back out to the pine-thick darkness and called the office and said she was sick. Should have sacrificed the $40 in tonight's wages rather than risk whatever was happening on the other side of that door. Instead, she moved closer. The door had a crack in its frame. Not much. Just enough. She positioned her eye there and saw 3 men she did not recognize. They were sitting across from him, Nicholas Caruso. She had only seen him twice in 6 months of working at the lodge. Both times, he looked like something that had been carved from expensive marble. Dark eyes that did not move. A scar running from the outside of his left eye down to his cheekbone, silvery pale and precise as a signature. He was wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his hands, large, scarred across the knuckles, were the only part of him that moved. His hands opened and closed as the conversation escalated from words to raised voices. "You agreed to the territory split," one of the men said. He was older, with a neck thick as a tree trunk and the kind of posture that came from a life lived in violence. "We shook on it." "I agreed to nothing," Caruso said. His voice was quiet. Deep and solid like an oath, the kind of voice that did not need volume to fill a room. A handshake is not a contract. A contract is a contract. "You're breaking an agreement that goes back 15 years, another man said. This one was younger, with hands that clenched and unclenched. His leg bounced beneath the table. "Fear. That was fear." "I'm correcting an oversight," Caruso said. He stood up. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 3, and the moment he stood, the other men understood something had shifted. He was not negotiating anymore. The negotiation was over. "You came to my territory. You took from my accounts. You did this believing I would not notice, or that I would care more about peace than about principles. You were wrong on both counts." The younger man's hand went to his jacket. Everything happened in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The man pulled a knife, a blade long and bright as malice. He lunged for Caruso across the table, and Caruso moved with a speed that seemed impossible for a body that large. He pivoted, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted. The knife went up, then down, then into Caruso's side as the other two men rushed forward and the younger man screamed something about empire and respect and death. Nora's hand flew to her mouth to stifle the gasp that wanted to escape. The fight was brief. Brutal. A chair fell. Glass shattered. One of the men slammed his head against the marble counter and went down. Another ran for the back exit. The younger man with the knife stood frozen, staring at what his blade had done, and then he was running too, and then there was silence. Only silence and the sound of rain beginning to hit the windows. Fat, heavy drops. The storm had arrived. Nora should have left. Should have moved away from the door and walked backward through the service entrance and disappeared into the rain and the trees and never come back. But she saw Caruso lean against the table, saw his hand go to his ribs, saw the blood spreading across his white shirt like a dark flower blooming. She pushed open the door. He looked up. Their eyes met, his dark, calculating, dangerous in that split second before he registered that she was a young woman in a maid's uniform and not a threat. His hand was still pressed to his side, and blood was seeping between his fingers. A lot of blood. The kind that meant you did not have unlimited time. "You need to leave," he said. His voice did not change. Still deep, still controlled, still like an oath. "You're bleeding," Nora said. "Yes. So you need to leave." She did not leave. Instead, she moved toward him. There was no logic to it. No survival instinct operating anymore. There was only the muscle memory of 6 years of learning how to tend to damage, how to bandage wounds, how to make things slightly less broken. When Emma had split her forehead open falling off the monkey bars, Nora had cleaned the wound. When her mother had a stroke and sat alone in a hospital with no one to hold her hand, Nora had learned how to bathe someone who could not stand. When Douglas had hit her, she had learned how to hide the bruises. She had been healing for so long that it had become automatic. "First aid kit," Nora said. "Kitchen." 5 minutes. She did not wait for him to answer. She moved through the kitchen with purpose, found the white box beneath the sink, returned with it open. His shirt was stained, the wound beneath it deep but not fatal. She had seen worse. Had been worse. She cleaned it with trembling hands that somehow did not shake, with competence she did not know she possessed. The rain hammered against the windows. The storm was a living thing outside, and inside, a maid was stitching up a crime boss like he was her child with a scraped knee. "Why?" he asked, and his voice was different now. Quieter. Not controlled anymore. Stripped of something. "Because you're bleeding," she said simply. Something shifted in his eyes. A recognition. A reckoning. A moment in which Nicholas Caruso, a man who had built an empire from the ashes of a violent childhood and a mother who died alone, saw something in this woman's face that changed everything. He did not know it yet. But everything was about to change. The kitchen was silent except for the sound of rain hammering the windows. Elena Voss stood at the sink in the Caruso Mountain Lodge, her hands trembling under warm water as she scrubbed a dinner plate that cost more than her monthly rent. Outside, the summer storm had turned vicious. Lightning split the sky like a blade wrapped in ice. She did not hear the footsteps behind her until it was too late. Blood. That was the first thing she noticed. Drops of it on the expensive marble countertop, dark against white like a confession. She turned slowly. Nicholas Caruso stood in the kitchen doorway, his silk shirt torn open, a knife wound bleeding across his ribs. His face was pale but controlled. His eyes were burning. For a moment, neither of them moved. Elena had learned long ago that certain people operated by different rules. The man standing before her, tall, dark-haired, with a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone and a gold watch worth more than everything she owned, was one of those people. She had heard the men at the lodge speak his name in whispers. Nicholas Caruso. Boss. A man who built an empire from violence and kept it through fear. She should have run. Instead, she moved toward him. "First aid kit," she said, her voice barely steady. Kitchen. 5 minutes. She did not wait for him to answer. She moved through the lodge with purpose, her mind shifting into the automatic place it went when there was damage to tend. She had been healing for so long that survival had become muscle memory. When Emma split her forehead on the monkey bars, Elena had cleaned the wound. When her mother lay in a hospital bed after a stroke, Elena had learned to bathe someone who could not stand. When Douglas had hit her, she had learned to hide the bruises. Now she found the white medical box beneath the sink, returned with trembling hands that somehow did not shake. His shirt was stained dark red. The wound beneath it was deep but not fatal. She had seen worse. Had lived worse. Why? He asked as she cleaned the blood away with practiced efficiency. His voice was different now. Quieter. Not controlled anymore. Stripped of something essential. Because you're bleeding, she said simply. Something shifted in his eyes. A recognition. A reckoning. A moment in which Nicholas Caruso, a man who had clawed his way up from the ruins of a violent childhood, saw something in this woman's face that changed everything. He did not know it yet. But nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, Elena returned to her apartment building in East Las Vegas. The neighborhood was a map of survival. Chain-link fences. Cracked sidewalks. Windows with bars on them like cages. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor carrying 2 grocery bags purchased with her last $5. Milk. Bread. Cheese. Eggs. Everything rationed. Everything counted. Emma needed lunch for school. Her son needed breakfast. Douglas Hale waited outside her door. He was 6'2", built like the construction work he did when he bothered to work at all. His smile never reached his eyes. The restraining order meant nothing to him because he had paid Officer Martinez at the local precinct $200 a month to ignore calls from this address. "Where have you been, Nora?" His voice was friendly, but his body blocked the doorway completely. "Working late. I have a restraining order, Douglas. You need to leave." She kept her voice level. Never defensive. Defensive meant he would push harder. That piece of paper. He laughed, stepped closer. She could smell the beer on his breath, heavy and sour. "Come on, baby. I just want to talk. Let me through. I heard you got a foreclosure notice. $22,000. That's rough." He was genuinely smiling now, the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. "You know I could help with that. If you were nicer to me." She tried to push past him. His hand came up and gripped her arm. Not hard enough to bruise. Never hard enough to leave evidence. That was the thing about Douglas, he had learned exactly how much force he could use without triggering mandatory reporting. He was efficient about his cruelty. "Let go," she whispered. "Or what? You'll call the cops? We both know how that works out." He released her, laughing, walked away down the stairs with the confidence of a man who had never faced consequences. Elena got inside and locked 3 deadbolts. She slid down the door shaking, trying to breathe, trying to become small again. Emma appeared in her pajamas from the bedroom. Was that Daddy? Her daughter's voice was uncertain. Afraid. "No, baby. Just a neighbor." That night, Elena lay in the dark and could not sleep. The $22,000 deadline ticked closer. 11 days left. She thought about the man at the lodge, Nicholas Caruso, the way he moved like something dangerous contained in human skin, the power in his silence. She had saved him from bleeding out on a marble floor. But what she did not comprehend was that he had already started making calls. 3 hours away, in a penthouse overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, Sophie Langford sat at floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the city glitter beneath her like something she owned. She was 47, wealthy, connected, and burning with a jealousy that tasted like rust. She had wanted to be Nicholas Caruso's partner in every sense. He had rejected her. Now she had watched him offer tenderness to a maid. A nobody from nowhere. The thought made her hands clench into fists. Sophie picked up her phone and made a call to a contact at the casino where Elena's brother worked. "I need you to spread something for me," she said, her voice soft and poisonous. "About Nora Reynolds. I want her unemployable. I want her friendless. I want her trapped." The contact hesitated. "What do I say?" "That she's sleeping with Nicholas Caruso to pay her debts. That she's using her children for sympathy. That she's a con artist who preys on wealthy men. Make it ugly. Make it spread." She hung up, smiling. If Nicholas wanted to play savior, she would make sure he saved nothing but ashes. 3 days later, Elena returned to the mountain lodge. The summer heat had broken into another thunderstorm. Rain turned the mountain road slick and treacherous. She arrived soaked, her uniform clinging to her skin, her hair plastered to her face. Nicholas Caruso waited for her in the main room by the stone fireplace. He sat in a leather chair, flames casting shadows across the scar on his face. Carlo and Theo stood near the door, watching her with expressions she could not read. "Sit," Caruso said. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat a. Water dripped from her uniform onto the hardwood floor. He poured tea from a ceramic pot, the gesture so incongruous from a man like him that she could only stare. The cup he handed her was warm. Delicate. Worth more than her weekly wages. "You're not scheduled tonight," he said. "I thought I was. I called you here." He leaned back, studying her. "Thank you. For 3 nights ago. For helping me." She said nothing. Accepted nothing. Just held the tea and waited for him to reveal his angle. "How much do you owe?" The question cut through her defenses like a blade. "That's not your concern." "How much, Elena?" She met his eyes. Nobody called her Elena except her mother, and her mother had been gone for 5 years. $22,000, she said quietly. "Foreclosure. I have 9 days left." She watched him process this. Waiting for judgment. Waiting for him to count the ways she had failed. Instead, he nodded once. "And the man outside your apartment 3 nights ago?" His voice was gentle. "Dangerous. The one who grabbed your arm." Her blood froze solid. "You had someone watching me. I had someone protecting you. There's a difference." Carlo stepped forward. His hand rested on the back of her chair. In 15 years working for Nicholas Caruso, he had never seen his boss focus on a woman like this. Not for leverage. Not for transaction. Because she mattered. "Tell me about Douglas Hale," Caruso said. "I can handle it." "Can you?" His voice cut like glass. "When he put his hands on you." Silence. Only the fire crackling. Only the rain hammering against windows. She broke. She told him everything. The abuse. The stalking. The restraining order that police ignored. The bribes. Living in fear. Emma waking up crying because someone knocked on the door. Her son sleeping with a knife under his mattress because he had learned young that protection was his responsibility. When she finished, her hands were shaking. "Why would you help me?" "I'm nobody," she whispered. He leaned forward. His eyes held hers like gravity. "You saved my life when you could have run. When most people would have run." He paused. It is rare for a person to look at a bleeding man and see something worth saving. Theo brought papers. A contract. Caruso slid it across the table toward her. "I'm paying off your foreclosure. $22,000. The only condition is you keep working here. Same hours. Same pay." She stared at the number. 22,000. The crushing weight that had been suffocating her for months. The thing that had made her consider things she never thought she would consider. "I can't accept this." You can. You will. Why? Her voice broke on the word. Because I don't let people under my protection suffer. Outside the lodge, in a luxury car parked in the rain, Sophie Langford sat with binoculars pressed to her eyes. She watched Elena sign the contract. Watched Caruso lean close. Watched something pass between them that looked like recognition. Like salvation. The jealousy burned acid in her throat. She made another call. And at that exact moment, Douglas Hale received a warning from Officer Martinez. Someone powerful was asking questions. Someone dangerous was making calls. Cornered animals, Elena did not yet know, are the most dangerous kind. 5 days after signing the contract, Nora walked Emma to school through streets that had turned hostile. The morning air carried the scent of desert dust and betrayal. Other mothers clustered near the school gates, their whispers sharp as broken glass. I heard she's sleeping with that crime boss, one woman said, loud enough to carry. Using her children to get money. Con artist, another added. Probably steals from him. Emma's small hand squeezed Nora's. Mommy, why are they saying mean things? Nora had no answer. She knelt beside her daughter, pulled her close, and for a moment the world fell away except for the smell of Emma's strawberry shampoo and the weight of her trust. Sometimes people are afraid of things they don't understand. It doesn't mean they're right. But Emma's eyes held a question Nora couldn't solve. By that afternoon, the poison had spread everywhere. The office cleaning company called. We're letting you go, the manager said, his voice carefully neutral. Budget cuts. Nora knew better. She'd worked those evening shifts for 18 months without a single complaint. Her brother called an hour later. I lost my job at the casino. Someone spread rumors. Said I was connected to criminals. They didn't even let me finish my shift. The walls collapsed inward, one by one. She sat in her apartment that evening, the $22,000 debt paid but no income flowing in, groceries running dangerously low, rent due in 10 days. Her wallet held exactly $5. $5 to feed 2 children and herself until something changed. She did not cry. Her tears had learned long ago that they were a luxury she could not afford. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Douglas. I heard your rich boyfriend dumped you. Guess you're back to needing me. The words hit like a fist to her stomach. She blocked the number. He called from a different one. Then another. Then he stopped calling altogether, which somehow felt worse. At 6:36 in the evening, Douglas Hale kicked down her apartment door. The lock splintered like a scream. Emma screamed. Nora grabbed her daughter and her brother, ran to the bathroom, locked that door too. The old wood would not hold long. Nothing here was built to withstand anything. Douglas raged outside, his voice thick with alcohol and something worse. Open this door. Open it. His fist hammered the bathroom door, and each impact sent splinters of paint cascading down like snow. Nora dialed 911 with shaking hands. Officer Martinez answered. His voice was the voice of every authority that had betrayed her. There's nothing we can do. Domestic dispute. He broke down my door. He's trying to get to my children. I'll send someone when available. The line went dead. She slid down the bathroom wall, children pressed against her, their breathing synchronized with her own. Rain had started outside, drumming on the small window like 1,000 fingers demanding entry. Emma cried silently, the way she had learned to cry when her father's anger filled the house, the way a child learns that sound could make things worse. Nora thought about the $5 in her wallet. The worn shoes in the closet. The foreclosure notice, paid but meaningless because they would lose everything anyway. Sophie's rumor spreading through every connection she'd built. Douglas's fists. The world crushing down with the weight of a coffin lid being sealed. She stood. Her legs moved without her permission. She reached for the window latch. The glass was cool beneath her palm. The 3rd floor. High enough. Fast enough. One moment and it would all stop. The pain. The fear. The exhaustion of surviving when survival meant nothing. Her fingers touched the cold metal of the latch. Emma tugged her sleeve. "Mommy, you said after rain comes sunshine. You promised." One sentence from a 6-year-old. A fact stated the way children state facts, without knowing that facts could destroy a person or save one. Nora dropped her hand. Pulled her children close. They would survive this. They had survived worse. But what she did not yet understand was that 2 miles away, Nicholas Caruso had just learned everything. Not from Sophie's gossip network. Not from rumors. From Carlo, who had men watching the apartment, who moved through the city like invisible hands. Carlo's voice had come through Caruso's phone, steady and urgent. "She's in the bathroom. 3 floors up. Douglas Hale broke through the door 15 minutes ago. Police won't respond. Officer Martinez is on Hale's payroll." The silence that followed held the weight of 1,000 decisions. Caruso sat in his office, the city spread below him like a kingdom that suddenly meant nothing. He looked at Carlo. Looked at Theo, who stood near the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "It's time," Caruso said. One phrase. 2 words. The end of restraint. He made one call. Then another. Within minutes, the machinery of power that had taken him 15 years to build moved with surgical precision. At 4:13 in the morning, the world changed again. FBI vehicles surrounded Douglas Hale's apartment building like a siege. Tactical teams in black moved like ghosts, 12 men coordinated to the second, each movement economical and exact. They breached the door. Not the bathroom door. Not Nora's door. His door. Douglas Hale woke to the muzzles of rifles and the glare of flashlights cutting through his bedroom like blades. "Douglas Hale," Agent Williams said, a voice carrying the weight of federal authority. "You're under arrest for racketeering, bribery of a police officer, violation of federal restraining orders, conspiracy to intimidate a witness, and wire fraud." He fell to his knees in his underwear, hands cuffed behind his back, begging. Wait, I can explain. Save it for your lawyer." The charges read like a sentence from God himself. 40 years federal prison. No parole. The evidence, financial records showing payments to Officer Martinez, text messages threatening Nora, videos from the lodge parking lot showing Douglas assaulting her 3 weeks earlier. Videos she didn't even know existed. Douglas collapsed, trembling like a cornered animal with nowhere left to run. "Please, I'll do anything." No one listened. They dragged him out. The hallway filled with the sound of his protests and the stomp of tactical boots on linoleum. News cameras flashed outside, capturing every moment. By sunrise, every channel in Las Vegas had run the story. Corrupted police officer arrested alongside domestic abuser in federal sting operation. Officer Martinez was taken in handcuffs 2 hours later, his uniform stripped away, his badge confiscated, his future erased in the time it took to recite Miranda rights. Meanwhile, across the city, FBI agents arrived at Sophie Langford's penthouse on the 42nd floor. She answered the door in her silk robe, the kind that cost more than 6 months of Nora's old rent. The agents didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Sophie Langford, you're under arrest for fraud, defamation with intent to harm, conspiracy to interfere with a federal witness, and wire fraud." Sophie's face drained of all color. She had not expected this. In her world of wealth and connections, she had assumed consequences applied to other people. "You can't do this. I have lawyers." "Your lawyers are already downstairs being questioned." Her bank accounts frozen. Her reputation destroyed in the same gossip networks she had wielded like a weapon. Civil suits from Nora for defamation. Criminal charges stacking like a house of cards built by the wind. The systematic destruction of everything Sophie Langford had used to destroy Nora Reynolds. Justice, Caruso understood, was not death. Death would be too quick, too easy, too merciful. death would allow escape. But this was the kind of justice that echoed across years. Sophie was led out in handcuffs, cameras capturing every angle. The woman who wanted to destroy a single mother now destroyed herself, a humiliation broadcast on every screen in the city. At 8:23 in the morning, Nora learned about it from her television. She stood in her apartment, the broken door still splintered open, and watched Douglas's mugshot cycle across every channel. Then Sophie's. Then Officer Martinez's. 40 years federal prison. No parole. The weight lifted from her chest like hands releasing after holding her underwater. For the first time in 2 years, she could breathe without pain. Emma came and wrapped her arms around her mother's legs. "Mommy," the rain stopped. Outside the window, the desert sun was breaking through the clouds, spreading across Las Vegas in waves of gold and amber and light so bright it seemed impossible that darkness had ever existed there at all. Nora held her daughter and thought about promises. About the ones you make and the ones that keep you alive. About second chances arriving in forms you never expected, delivered by hands that had built empires but chose instead to build mercy. The rain had stopped. And after the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. The door to Nora's apartment stood reinforced now, the wood no longer splintered, the lock mechanism new and heavy and secure. Nicholas Caruso carried 2 canvas bags of groceries in his hands, not delegated to an assistant, not delivered by courier, but held by him, his dark suit jacket open at the collar, the late morning light catching the silver threading through his hair. He stood in the doorway like a man uncertain whether he had the right to cross a threshold into such ordinary life. Emma peered from behind her mother's legs, one eye visible, cautious. "Is that the man who helped us?" she whispered. Nora nodded, her throat tight. Nicholas lowered himself to one knee so his eyes met Emma's at her level. His movements were deliberate, careful, the way a person moves around something fragile. "I'm Nicholas. I'm a friend of your mom's." Emma studied him with the serious expression of a child who had learned young to read danger in adult faces. "Mommy says you saved us." "Your mom saved me first," he said quietly. "The night of the storm. I was hurt. She helped me when she had every reason to run." Emma processed this information with the gravity of a judge weighing testimony. Then she stepped forward and took his hand, small fingers wrapping around his palm. "Thank you for saving Mommy." Carlo and Theo waited outside in the black SUV parked on the street below, engines running soft. Carlo watched through the tinted window as Nicholas disappeared inside, groceries and all. He turned to Theo, shook his head slowly. 15 years, Carlo said. 15 years I've worked for him. Never seen him like this. Theo lit a cigarette, the smoke curling against the windshield. Think it's real. I think it's the most real thing he's ever had, Carlo answered. I think a man can build an empire and still be empty inside. And then one person walks through a door and suddenly the empire doesn't matter anymore. Inside, the kitchen table was the same table where Nora had counted bills with $5 remaining, where she had done mathematics that added up to despair. Now Nicholas sat across from her, Emma between them coloring on a piece of paper, the ordinary scene rendered extraordinary by his presence in it. He had set the groceries on the counter, real food, vegetables that hadn't been bruised in the discount bin, milk with days left before expiration, things that represented a future instead of mere survival. The foreclosure notice, Nora said quietly. The $22,000. How? My people began investigating Douglas the day after the parking lot, Nicholas interrupted, his voice level, factual. The moment his hands touched your throat. We found the pattern. Every woman he's hurt. Every police officer he bribed. Every bruise documented nowhere because the system chose to look away. Nora's hands trembled slightly. You made me a witness. Without asking. Without. You were already a witness, he said. The moment you saw that meeting in my office, you became part of something larger than yourself. I simply ensured you survived long enough to testify. But the money, she pressed. The $22,000. Sophie said, Sophie Langford lied as easily as she breathed. You needed that money. Not because of testimony or evidence or any of that. Because you and your children were drowning, and I had the means to pull you to shore. He paused, his grey eyes steady on hers. Why is it so difficult for you to accept help? Because I learned long ago that nothing comes without a price, Nora whispered. That men who help want payment, and the currency is always my dignity. Nicholas reached across the table, his hand open, not grabbing, not demanding. Just waiting. After a moment, Nora placed her hand in his. The contact was electric, a shock of warmth that traveled up her arm and settled somewhere behind her ribs. I grew up in Seoul, he said, and his voice carried a different quality now, something raw underneath the control. My father was a man who used his fists the way other men use words. My mother learned not to speak, not to move, not to be anything that might draw his attention. I promised myself that I would never be him. That I would never touch a woman in anger. That I would never let another child watch their mother disappear into fear. Emma looked up from her coloring. My daddy hit Mommy. Until the mean man came and took Daddy away. Nicholas's eyes glistened. Yes. Until the mean man came. You're not mean, Emma said with the absolute certainty of children. You're scared. Grown-ups are scary when they're scared. Nora felt something break open in her chest, watched it happen on Nicholas's face too. A man who had murdered without hesitation, who commanded empires of violence, undone by the simple perception of a 6-year-old girl who saw fear underneath power. I kept these, Nora said, standing suddenly. She went to the bedroom, returned with Emma's first pair of shoes from the shelter, tiny sneakers worn through at the heels, the laces frayed. She placed them in Nicholas's hands. Every time I wanted to give up, I looked at these and remembered that we survived. That we made it out. He held the shoes like they were made of glass, like they might shatter beneath his fingers, and a tear escaped down his scarred cheek. Carlo, watching from below, would later tell Theo that he had never seen their boss cry. Would say that the moment seemed to crack something open in the world itself, some fundamental agreement about who men like Nicholas Caruso were allowed to be. The night stretched on. Through the windows, the city lights of Las Vegas glittered like scattered diamonds. Nora and Nicholas talked about survival, about the architecture of fear, about what happens when someone looks at your worst moment and doesn't look away. They didn't speak of love yet. Love seemed too small a word for what bound them together, two people who had pulled each other from drowning, who recognized in each other the kind of strength that only comes from refusing to break. Emma fell asleep against Nicholas's shoulder around midnight, her small body trusting in a way that seemed impossible. 6 months passed like a dream that might dissolve at any moment. Winter had transformed the mountain lodge into something from a different world entirely. Snow hammered the windows in waves, the wind howling down the peaks, the fireplace crackling with steady warmth. Nora's children were no longer sleeping in a borrowed apartment. They lived here now, in rooms filled with sunlight, with stability, with the kind of safety that takes time to trust. The lodge had been converted from a place of secret meetings into a home. Emma sat at the kitchen table, multiplication problems spread before her on notebook paper. Nicholas wore reading glasses perched on his nose, adjusting them as he checked her work, looking entirely unlike the man who had once ordered rivals dismantled like automobiles. His suit jacket hung over a chair. His sleeves were rolled to the elbows. He was, in this moment, simply a man helping a child understand numbers. Nora watched from the kitchen doorway, the same posture she used to hold when she was invisible. But invisibility no longer felt like safety. It felt like a choice she no longer needed to make. Douglas Hale was into year 1 of a 40-year federal sentence, his letters returned unopened, his appeals rejected with the finality of doors slamming shut. Sophie Langford's trial had ended 3 months ago. Her bank account seized, her assets liquidated, her reputation incinerated so completely that she could no longer walk into restaurants in Las Vegas without being recognized and rejected. Officer Martinez had lost his badge, faced his own charges, was serving 2 years in the same federal facility where Douglas was spending forever. Justice, it turned out, could be both swift and thorough when delivered by people with power who chose to use it precisely. Nicholas looked up, caught Nora watching, and smiled. The smile reached his eyes, transformed his entire face into something almost unrecognizable in its gentleness. She joined them by the fire. Emma leaned against her mother while Nicholas explained fractions, his large hand guiding the pencil, his patience infinite. They didn't have traditional endings, not yet. No wedding announcement, no declarations of forever. But they had something deeper, two people who had recognized survival in each other and chosen not to look away. Emma's first shoe sat on the mantel now, placed there as a reminder of how far they had traveled from that night when Nora had only $5 and a child's hand to hold. The snow fell heavier as evening approached. The lodge glowed warm against the darkness. And in that warmth, in the space between danger and safety, two survivors were learning the most difficult thing of all, to trust that rescue can come without price, that strength recognizes strength, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you saved first. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.